And we're live. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out to join me today for my second author interview of October. This is kind of a packed month for me, author interview wise. But I'm joined today by the wonderful Marika Bailey, who's written some very fantastic science fiction and fantasy shorts that I have really enjoyed reading to research for this interview. So I'm going to read from her bio, and then we're going to kind of get into the questions. And just a reminder, this is a live interview, so if you leave questions in the comment section, I'll vet them, but then I might pass them over to Marika to answer. So, don't be shy. So, Marika Bailey is an Afro-Caribbean author and illustrator. Her work has previously appeared in FIYAH magazine and Strange Horizons. A childhood obsession with mythology led to her current habit of writing stories. She lives in Brooklyn, New York with her husband and the softest cat in the world. You can find her tweeting about drawing and 80s sitcoms as Marika Writes. Anything else you want to add to the bio?
No, I think you hit the high notes. Thank you.
So this wasn't a planned question, but I feel like I have to ask. You're from Brooklyn. What's your favorite thing about Brooklyn? I feel like people from New York City love to brag about their borough. So
I don't know. I just think of it as home. Like it's my hometown. It's where I grew up as a kid. It's where I met my husband. It's where I would like to stay, if the forces of gentrification don't force me out. It just there's this old joke a friend of mine has about Michigan that the trees are just the right height. When I'm in Brooklyn, it feels like the buildings are just the right height. Like um, it feels like I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just living. So that's why I love
nice. Oh, sorry, I had to say hi to someone real quick in the comments. Thanks for sharing all that. I have not really actually been to New York City. I feel like I did one little field trip in high school, but we're
It's
in
not
a
going to
really
be the
touristy
same.
area. You don't learn much.
I don't think I think New Yorkers actively avoid touristy stuff. Like when I was a teenager and family would visit from like abroad because I'm an immigrant. And so whenever my family would visit, they'd be like, well, take us to all of the magnificent New York things. And I would be like, if we could possibly not do that, if we could possibly just let me lay here and die, I would really appreciate it. But I think like there's like lots of really great things. Like if you get out into Brooklyn, there's like tons of food to eat. We have the best park in North America. Prospect Park is better than Central Park. It's just a good place to chill and eat and just watch the world. So if you did come to Brooklyn, I would have many restaurant recommendations and museum recommendations, but I would probably not have like tourist spots on my list, except if you do want to see the Statue of Liberty, take the Staten Island ferry because it's free and you can just go past and you can wave at Lady Liberty and then you can get off in Staten Island and eat Sri Lankan food, and then get back on the ferry and go back to Manhattan.
Keep that in mind. Um, so on to you as a writer. What got you into mythology and writing?
I think those were mythology has kind of like always been like the first books that I remember reading. I think the first two books I ever had were books that I literally slept with at night. To the point where like I would wake up and the page like they would be like stuck to my face and the pages would be ripped because I had like kind of like wriggled on them in the night. And I had two books that I clearly remember. One was Delaunay's Greek mythology, and it was illustrated, and it was like one of those like big like
Yeah.
books that they make for kids. And the other one was literally like an illustrated Bible. So as a really bad Catholic, I conflate those in my head, like the Bible and Delaunay's Greek. And I can still remember like the illustration of like Queen Esther that is still stuck in my head from when I was maybe like 6 years old. And those books those were my first stories that I ever read and read by myself and kind of imprinted on like these kinds of like stories about very, very capricious gods who were pretty much us, very much it, like I feel like the Greek myths are very much kind of like soap operas, but on a very grand scale. And on a certain level, so is the Bible. It's very much, kind of like God, especially in the Old Testament, is very much kind of like, see, like God woke up on the wrong side of the universe in the Old Testament. And kind of like these dramas of kingdoms and people in love and people marrying the wrong sister and then having to marry the other sister, and that sense of like drama on this grand epic scale, but tied to very small people just trying to survive in the middle of these like titanic forces. I think that is those are the first stories that um I really loved, and so it's kind of what I end up gravitating to as a writer and also as still as a reader.
I remember the dealers. I don't even remember how to say it. I barely remember how to spell it. But I remember they also had like the Norse one too. They had those scratchy like illustrations in them and stuff. They're a lot of fun. So have you also are an illustrator, and I was wondering if you have illustrated anything that you've written.
When I saw this question, I really had to sit down and think about it because I don't at this point. I think of when I'm drawing, it's usually for a commission or because I had a specific image in my head that I wanted to make, or in a very strange way because I wanted to see if I could draw something. I think that, and that's also kind of how I write, is I write to see if I have the capacity to write a
Mhm.
certain kind of story. And so those two things haven't tended to meld together because I do them at very, very different rates. I write at a glacial pace, like it's like me and like the geological processes of the earth. So that's like how fast I write. And I tend to draw a lot faster, but also tend to be a lot less happy with with my artistic process. So they feel kind of like two different parts of my brain in a lot of ways. And uh, um I've only very rarely brought them together. My thesis in college, I did a graphic novel interpretation of A Midsummer Night's Dream as science fiction, and I think that's like literally the only time I managed to put together enough executive function to make my art and my writing move together um, at the same pace, because they usually absolutely don't.
Gotcha. Um, like, would you ever do like a graphic novel or something like that, or like it's just
Love
very
to.
different process?
I would love to. I think that it's again, it would be like this challenge of seeing if I could, like if I could force
Mhm.
my brain to work like that. And if I could force myself to be able to, like, I am always in awe of comic artists and artists who have to draw sequentially because they draw the same character or the same world over and over again, and there's like a certain level of consistency but also novelty that they have to maintain in all of that artwork, and it's incredibly difficult, and I have so much respect for the artists who do it and do it well. So that would be a huge challenge for me, and so it would be kind of like figuring out when I have the time to do it because it would pretty much preclude me doing anything else. So maybe one day when I feel a lot more confident, I think, in being able to write faster, then I might do it.
Gotcha. So I was wondering in general, there are some stories you have written that have like a very like mythic feel to like the narrative voice. It's something it's very difficult for me to describe, but like when I read it, I like recognize it. And I was wondering if that is something that comes like naturally to you, or is that something you kind of have to work to cultivate?
I I think that every time I write a story, it is its own specific voice, because I tend to hyper focus down into that story, and the kind of semi mythic voice I think is also kind of a reflection of being raised on like very mythic fantasy and sci-fi, like the kind of thing where, like you're reading Tolkien and he's telling you about like the hobbits, but also like the rabbit 2 miles down the road who also saw the hobbits pass by. Like this it's very much like when I'm writing, I'm narrating the movie that's in my head. So a lot of it is trying to figure out what to share with you
Mm,
about the movie that's in my head. And sometimes the rabbit comes in. And sometimes, like I will be describing something that's very micro, like, like a fly on somebody's face. And then I like to zoom all the way out and think about, like, well, where did that fly come from? Was it born on like the corpse of like a king and then flew all the way over to land on this one person's face? And so I kind of think of it as I'm I'm in the middle of watching this awesome, awesome film, and it's unfortunately stuck in just my brain. And I'm trying to pass it on to hopefully the reader in the best way that I possibly can, to so that they can feel what I feel when I'm looking at this image and when I'm thinking about these imaginary people who I have thought up and have put through a lot, quite frankly. Um, so yeah, I think that it's let's blame the books that I read way too early for that.
gotcha. So, one of the stories that you'd written that I enjoyed was there will be a question and answer period after your inevitable demise. And the structure of that story is basically a bunch of women who have been killed or had their children killed by various heroes are talking to a hero who has recently died. And it's told in kind of like a video call like transcription format. Like you're kind of like in the waiting room, and then there's like all these different people like butting in. And I was wondering why you picked like that structure for the story.
There's two reasons. The first is, once again, to see if I could do it. I wanted to see what the afterlife could look like, in a sense of like being a participant but not necessarily being in control of that process. And trying to figure out a way to describe purgatory. And it was also, I was writing this in the summer of 2020, and so we were all indoors, and I was, like we were all indoors and grieving and sad, and also always on a Zoom call. Like that was the first year where being on a Zoom call and like, am I muted, am I not muted, like, what is there a chat going on that I can't see? I don't know how to press this button. Like that was the first time where I think en masse, like millions of us were trying to deal with this communication source that was in our house that we have absolutely no control over. And our bosses are insisting we're on camera, but we can't really speak while we're on camera. We're just like being watched. And so to me, it did in fact feel like hell. And so it just kind of grew into this idea of purgatory as constantly being watched and having to watch, but
Hmm.
not being able to control who you're talking to or what's happening to you or how long it's going to end. Just being at the mercy of being known by other people. Um, and it was also, like I was started writing after George Floyd's murder and thinking about people who've never had the ability to control whether or not they're listened to, and what people who have been essentially put on mute would demand from the universe if they could have the power. And that's how that story came to be. It is the shortest story I've ever managed to write, and it kind of just came out onto the page almost fully formed. I made very few edits to it, and um, it's one of my favorite things that I've ever written, but I also think one of the weirdest things I've ever written, which is probably why I love it so much. It is very much its own thing. Um, and also is my husband's favorite thing that I've ever written. And he would be very happy to know that you brought it up. Thank you.
I had a follow-up question. Gosh. Well, I mean, I'm assuming your husband reads everything you write.
He is my beta reader. And I am also his beta reader. That is one of the foundations of our relationship. I I'm not in a writers group. Um, as you can see, I have a fear of being known. And I'm also a very solitary writer. So I just have like one or two people who I really trust to know that they understand what I'm trying to do, and whose taste in writing is similar to mine. And that's like maybe three people on the planet. So probably another reason why I write so slowly.
If I was wondering if your husband had like a top three, but I guess he's like not really here to answer, so it doesn't really make sense to
He's not
ask.
even in the house. He's at a wedding this weekend. Um, I know that one's his favorite. I think probably the story that I have just finished but haven't subbed yet is
Okay.
probably one of his favorites. I've been working on that one for a while. And then probably my Orpheus and Eurydice story. I would say he really likes that one. And he's gonna see this and be like, "No, you were completely wrong." So let's see what happens. I can't wait. I can't wait for him to tell me that I'm wrong.
I'm just curious what it's like if you're like, I guess, dating an author or something like that. Does it have to be like, I love all your stories equally, or like, are you allowed to have favorites or not?
No, I mean, we talk about each. I have a favorite story of his, like, absolutely. Like, we all have like themes that we are really drawn to. And like sometimes, like, like, hey, that sentence you wrote really hit. Like, like, well done. Put your foot in that. Um, so I think that, yeah, I think that it's pretty easy being married to the writer I'm married to because he's the person I'm married to. And so we do read each other's work, and we try to be like very gentle about requesting each other read each other's work.
Mm.
But then also he knows that I am such an intense critic. Like I will go in there and like I'm leaving like paragraphs of comments and whatnot. But he also knows that I have never in my life cared about grammar. So he's just inserting commas where commas should be. We have our strengths, and they're different strengths.
It's funny. For circling back to the story really quick, there will be a question and answer period. Um, was it difficult to come up with like usernames for everyone? Because I feel like there's at least five different usernames in there, and I couldn't like track all of who was who because I'm not super up to date on up to date. I haven't read a lot of Greek mythology enough to get it all. So I was wondering if it was like difficult to come up with the usernames, and if there's like one where you're like, this is the best, like this is
Oh, See, I do really, oh my God. See, now I need to remember them or like look them up. Um, I really enjoyed that part, so thank you for bringing it up. Like that is like one of my favorite like little like presents that I left myself in the story. I always leave myself presents in a story to come back to. And so those usernames were my favorite. Um, I think I think one of my favorite is Beowulf's mom. I think I can't remember what I named her. I think I named her like no one's mother.
Hmm.
But yeah, there's a bunch of people in there. There's the mother of the Minotaur, Pasiphae, who's also in another story that I wrote. And there is the mother of Beowulf, who I don't believe gets a name in the original story, which I've always thought was fascinating. And oh God, see, this is where not being able to have a memory is coming to bite me in the butt. But yes, those are my favorite things in that story. Are those like random names? I think Witch Bitch is a name. And I think that was for Speakerax. That is for the witch from the Tempest who I believe dies before the story even starts. And it's her island that they've all landed on. So there's is just all of the Easter eggs that I leave in a story are kind of like just part of like the flotsam and jetsam of my brain of just Shakespeare references and Golden Girls references and Murder She Wrote references a lot of the times. There's going to be some Are You Being Served references there because I was raised by PBS and British sitcoms. Um, and that's just me leaving a trail for myself in the future to giggle at because I have ADHD. So I have forgotten what I wrote. And so in 2 years, I will read the story again. I'll be like, oh, that's hilarious. Wow. Didn't know I wrote that.
Nice. I was just looking up Are You Being Served? I was like, is this about like court papers? Like are they like
Yeah,
the people who like
I love that. I love it is about a department store. It is a very old, incredibly dated, incredibly problematic, but also in some ways kind of future, like ahead of its time, British sitcom about workers in a very crumbling old department store in the 70s in Great Britain. And it is like a time capsule of that period of time. And for some reason, is always on New York, like the New York tri-state area public television on like Fridays and Saturdays. And no idea why public television decided that this one show was going to be it. But it's now on Amazon Prime, and it is very dated and very problematic. I cannot state that enough if anyone ends up watching this show. But it also is a show that basically that influenced my sense of humor way too much. Like I was calling boys on the playground chauvinistic pigs at like 8. Like I had no
wow,
business
that's like
watching this show.
really I think someone in the comments recognized the name of it. I'm surprised they got British TV on public television. I'm trying to remember what we watched. I feel like we just got like Kids WB and like stuff like that. Like I don't think we got anything. Oh, because Pat's from the UK. So I
Oh,
was
okay.
watching up with
Yeah. I have no idea why like Channel 13, which is our public TV station in New York, was like, yeah, we're gonna be watching Are You Being Served and Keeping Up Appearances every Friday and Saturday evening, and this one small black child is going to in just like soak it all up. And one day it's gonna show up in a story. But yeah, that is it's my brain is just random references that have no business being together in one place.
I'm debating if I want to watch Golden Girls, Are You Being Served, and the third one to see if I get the references. I'm already
Keeping
playing
Up
through this.
Appearances, okay, so Keeping Up Appearances is an amazing dialogue on the British class system. It is hilarious. And my husband, who is a huge socialist, cannot watch it because he hates the main character so much. And but it's like if you want to understand why the British class system is so weird and also intensely different from the way class is in America, then I would say if you were into that, watch Keeping Up Appearances and Are You Being Served? But like definite notes for like triggering material in Are You Being Served?
Gotcha, gotcha. I had a question about another one of your short stories. I don't know how to pronounce this third word in it though, honey, and
Uh,
I want to say
Neen,
phenomenon, but I'm
Neen.
not right.
It's like it's pronounced like the way you pronounce mnemonic device. So like
Mm.
at the beginning of mnemonic, there's an M and an N, but you don't
Mhm.
really say the
So it's Neen?
M.
Honey
Mhm.
and Neen? Okay, got it. So, Honey and Neen is about a woman who died, and her husband, who's like some wizard musician, brings her back to life. When she comes back to life, she doesn't have any memories, and she thinks that the circumstances of her death are like very, very suspicious. Um, and you said that this was your Orpheus and Eurydice story?
Mhm.
I was wondering why you decided to like do this spin on that. So which is a lot more optimistic and romantic than this one is.
Um, I I always thought that Orpheus and Eurydice story was kind of messed up. Like there's two things in here. I was reading a lot about the idea of Guinea in African diasporic like folk culture, like the idea of the land where we go to after death as being a place of rest.
Mm,
And also reading about like the idea of zombie and zombification as a way to like deny someone rest after death.
mm,
And I was also at the same time watching another British television show where they mentioned the opera that is based off of Orpheus and Eurydice. And I kind of had like the lyrics rolling around in my head. And I was like, so if I died and I'm just minding my dead business and someone tries to bring me back to life, like wouldn't I be mad as hell? Like if you're like no one asked Eurydice, would you like to still be alive? What was your like no one did like an exit interview. How was your experience of life? Would you do this again? Would you recommend this to a friend? No one really asked her. It was the assumption that she wanted to go with Orpheus and that she loved him and that he was a good husband. But just because someone is willing to go after you doesn't mean that they loved you in a healthy way. And
mm,
I think that being willing to go into hell essentially and without ever really asking that person, do you like he doesn't like if you can't even like ask them, hey, were you enjoying death? Was this like were you enjoying the experience? Because I can meet you later. You know, like if there's a guaranteed afterlife, like we can hook up at later at the like gift shop or something. But there didn't seem to be the story isn't really about Eurydice, it's about Orpheus being really, really sad and wanting her back. And what if she doesn't want to come back? And that's
mm,
why I wrote the story, because I think it's kind of creepy to deny someone um, their their rightful rest after they're dead and after they had to be married to your musician ass for however long and put up with you, and now they can't even take a break. And that kind of like feeling possession over someone else, I thought was more of a horror story than a love story.
I was trying to remember how Eurydice died in the book, 'cause I thought it was,
I
like, some tragic
She
accident
was
type
bitten by a
story.
snake.
Oh. And, what else did I have about this one? Hmm. I guess there's, like, a lot of, like, world building stuff that, like, kinda happens like, the world is very vast, but, like, there's only, like, a very small snippet of it that we see. I guess what's your world building process for stories like this where it's, like, the reader's not necessarily gonna be told everything?
Um, I think the world building process is once again another part of my writing process, which is I write way more than ever gets published. Like there's always kind of like a very long, intense 21st pages. That's just like the first third of the story. And then I figure out, and then I kind of like put it in a drawer in Google Drive and let it ferment for a little bit. And then I bring it out and I'm like, some of this is good and interesting, and we're going to bring it back out. So I kind of think of it as like pruning it into a shape that someone would like to have in their garden, rather than having it be tangents on things. I always end up going into tangents on like mushrooms and the idea of like death and God and like, and I'm like, yeah, but we gotta rein ourselves in here, friend. So I think my world building is a lot about figuring out what makes sense for this person to know and for this person to have an emotional reaction to. So if something touches upon why someone is making a choice or why someone is reacting a certain way, I feel like I have to make the world around them justify those choices, because
Mm.
I don't think of characters as kind of like, oh, they're going to do this and they're going to do that. Like they have like people I feel are reacting to things that happen to them or reacting to a world that demands a certain action. And so how do I make that, even if they're doing something horrible, even if they're doing something painful, how do I make it make sense to the reader that yeah, that person's gonna do that because they have no other choice based on who they are and what the world is like. This decision is the only decision that they could come to.
Gotcha. So I feel like there's not yeah, I don't know how much I can ask about this story because there's a lot of twists, or at least one big twist. Um, so I'll ask about a different one. So another story of yours is Seed Vault, which is about
Mhm.
this planet, is it Tiere or
Tier.
Tier? Where basically a bunch of poor people are kind of like dumped there by like the government. Like they
Mhm.
were told, like, oh, you know, you can set this new life here and blah blah blah. And we're gonna be sending you like supplies and stuff. And then once they got to the planet, the government just kind of like forgot about them, didn't send anything. Um, and it's like this like kind of barren desert planet. But eventually, the people who were initially dumped there are able to like make a way, make a civilization, and it's about what happens when the people who sent them there kind of decide to circle back. And I was wondering what inspired you to like I guess what inspired you to write about planetary exodus in the way that you do in this story?
I was thinking a lot about the Caribbean and specifically being part of the Black diaspora in the Caribbean, in being settled into a place,
Mm,
not against your will, and also living in a place that is colonized, not against, and but not at your power, and kind of like figuring out how to deal with the fact that the planet that came, the planet that these people were essentially brought to was, there was an attempt at terraforming, and it went really, really badly. It did not go well at all. And so how do you figure out a new way to live that doesn't replicate the violence that was done to you in the past, is essentially the question that I'm trying to work through in the story. Because it's the violence of colonialism, and also the violence of thinking of space as a place that we go and we settle. And that space and other planets are places that need us to change them, rather than thinking of space as, and other planets and other life forms as entities that we should approach with, like equal equal importance as our own. Like those places and those people exist, and their existence as they are is just as valid as our existence as we are. And how do we learn as, a colonized people, a people who were created because of um, the invention of race and the modern invention of capitalism, how do we move beyond those, the ways those ideas have been damaging and have created so much pain? um and I think science fiction has always had like this, in especially like the quote unquote golden era of science fiction, has had this idea of planets as um blank slates, or things to be controlled or tamed, and the idea of settlers as being brave. And especially in and I think that especially at this point in human society, there's this idea of space as a way to escape the problems that we have here on Earth. And I believe that our problems will follow us no matter where we go, because they are intrinsic to who we are as a species. And we have to deal with those things. We have to deal with um, the very human desire to create in groups and out groups, and to create hierarchies of power. And we will essentially replicate that no matter where we are, unless we deal with it very intentionally. And so I wanted to talk about, like this very personal history of the Caribbean as this like colonized space, but also a space that has been settled by people who were brought there against their will. Um, and how, in dealing with those past, you can create something better, or something that is different and deals with things on its own terms. But also, it is a story about grief, and the main character kind of like growing up and having to deal with things that her mother never told her, and which is also very West Indian. It's just kind of like, I feel like it's very West Indian to like find out things at funerals. Like, oh, look, this is an annotated list of things that were never told to me about this person until they're dead. Um, so it's all of those kinds of things. It's also the first story that I ever had published. And I will always be grateful to Strange Horizons for that, because it is a very weird story. And also very long, and they definitely took a chance on that.
It was interesting rereading the story for the interview, because as just things I hadn't noticed before, because I hadn't read as much the first time I'd read it, just like in terms of I guess like context, even just like Black SFF, like how authors have been talking about life on other planets, like thinking like Octavia Butler and like Earthseed and seeing the stars is like almost like a religious mandate, or like Emergency Skin by N.K. Jemisin, where it's almost like reversed with what happens with the planets. Or like Midnight Robber by Nell Hopkinson, where I don't know if we actually know why the planets were colonized, but they do have a planet where they dump people that are like rule breakers. Um, I don't know. Parts of the story even made me think about like the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, and specifically like the people's relationship with the planet once they're there. Um, so yeah, it was just something I really enjoyed about this story. Um, I was also wondering, I guess, about the protagonist's relationship with the gods, because I feel like it's very informal because she sees them all the time, and like she's a little annoyed with them. She's like, they're like barnacles, like you can't get rid of them; they're everywhere.
Is I think that I think that yeah, the relationship is a lot is different because it's a symbiosis. Like these gods definitely can't exist without us. Like they are us in a very specific way. But they are also the medium through which we talk to the world around us. And in the story, um, almost directly how they interact, they are able to interact with the planet is because of their relationship with their god. And I was also really influenced by um, the idea of a chosen people and having that contract. My husband is Jewish, and so it's I've even though I'm not Jewish, I am a very lapsed Catholic. I do enjoy the relationship of kind of like we're going to essentially bicker a little bit with God, and we're going to go through the contract at length, and we may have some disagreements on how to express the rules in this contract, and it's definitely going to be like a conversation. And I really like that. I really like that as an aspect about a religious relationship. Because I in many ways find the ways in which I was raised around Catholicism as kind of like rules from on high. Like
Mhm.
you're constantly being judged, um, to be um, very alienating. And so, what kind of relationship with a God could sustain you in a place that is so hostile to you? And I think it would have to be a relationship where like y'all is close, like we are family, and we are in many cases we are going to be bickering throughout the universe, but we are essentially bonded for eternity. And so that's the kind of relationship I wanted, is this kind of very familial, very much like these gods have been with us since, since before a slave ship ever was on a horizon, and they will be with us when the last light in the universe goes out. That's what I wanted.
Thank you for sharing that. So I think the last story we're going to talk about today is going to be Daughters with Bloody Teeth, which is about a young woman who lives in this like fantasy kingdom where there's this forest of the laughing dogs, and you're not supposed to go in there if you like being alive. And she goes in there, and I mean, she doesn't really. She lives, but maybe not in a not in a conventional sense that can be explained. Um, and I was wondering, um, what like inspired you to write about like this transformation that she undergoes while in the forest? Like to me, it's almost like a werewolf transformation, but like not quite. Like I was very intrigued by.
I'm sorry, my cat just like decided he's gonna attack my feet. Please
Uh,
continue.
I was just like very intrigued by like the like predator prey relationship, but also kind of like sister familial relationship and stuff that's going on between the main character and like one of the laughing dogs or wolves that she encounters in the forest.
Um, I I think that my beginning with the story was like the idea of like being eaten, but then the meal doesn't agree with you. And that's like so much less like weighty than anything else that I have discussed today this morning. It was really just like, yeah, what if you're getting eaten and you're just like, this is bullshit. And then like the monster eating you is like, what? It's just basically like just the monster's like, what? And the food is like, what? And it's just like, and here we are. We are now in this story together. And I literally had that idea and I built a whole world around it. I wish I could say that I was having like some deep gastronomical thought. I did not. I was literally dickering around on Twitter. And I think it was like I was looking at like a tweet from like Cassandra Kah, who's like talking about Monster Girls. And somebody was talking about like, what if like the monster girl, like, what if like the girl is the monster? And I was like, huh, yeah, being eaten by a monster girl and then becoming the monster girl. That's it. It was literally no thoughts, just vibes. And then and then this story kind of landed and I really love this story. I really love the process of working on it a lot. I think it's like on a writer level, I think the process of working with um, my editor at Beneath Ceaseless Skies was just really, really wonderful because they really asked me interesting questions about the structure of my words that I hadn't thought about when I wrote the story. And it's something that stayed with me ever since, just like the idea of expressing like identity and bodily change through like tenses and um word changes. And so I think this is the story that I've probably had like the most fun in writing, other than a brief question and answer period, which I cackled throughout reading because it is very dark, but I also find it hilarious.
So let's say you're to become like a human hybrid with like something that you ate last that didn't agree with you. What is like the hybrid that you're gonna be, and how's that gonna affect your daily life?
On sheer volume, it's gonna be coffee. I drink way too much coffee. If I could become a human hybrid, I would like to become a human hybrid with my ADHD medication because that would mean that I would not need a prescription and I could just walk through the world neurotypical, just be like, look at me. I'm gonna choose to do this thing and it's gonna happen. And that would be a superpower. It would be amazing. I would be like, oh, what did I eat 2 months ago? And I would be able to remember. I just can't even imagine it. Like that would be wild. Like making a to-do list, checking everything off. That would be awesome. I would really like that. Um, I would also really like to be like Korean fried chicken because then I would just be delicious. Like that, like I don't know, it'd probably be dangerous. I think like walking around delicious might be dangerous. Like just like on a personal safety level, I would have to stay home all the time. But if I were to become like if I had to become like one with an animal, like if an animal was gonna eat me and I would become the animal, I think probably Komodo dragons are really cool because they are not actually venomous. Their bite will kill you,
Nasty.
but they're not venomous. They just have so much bacteria in their teeth that you die of sepsis. And that's metal. Like I love that. That's super cool. Um or there's this like small cat, like there's the smallest cat in the world, I think, and it's like 5 pounds and it can like fit in your hand, but it kills like 20 animals a night. and it is small and fluffy and adorable and cute, but also just like a machine of death. And I would also like to be that cat.
I don't remember what that cat is called. 'Cause I remember seeing it on Twitter.
I think it's called like an African sand cat or something, like something very banal. It doesn't
No, okay.
have like
It's not a
a
fun
super
name.
cool name like Spot of Doom, which is what
Yeah.
it should be called, like Hairball of Mercy or something. Like it should have a badass name, but it's just kitty, because humans are just like, oh, it's a kitty. That's all we have.
No, Komodo dragons are so disgusting. I remember watching a what
They're
was it, Nat
amazing.
Geo thing, and they're like, it was like going up against like a buffalo or a bison or something, and then and you're like, this is a small little Komodo dragon. What's it gonna do against a bison? It just like took like one bite, and then it just like started following the bison. It's like any day now, any day.
Yeah, I'm just letting you die. Like I don't really need to do much more. My job here is done. Look, we can wrap this up. I also like, what else? Hippos, I think.
Oh no.
A hippo would be great. Hippos look cute. And I was literally having this conversation with someone last weekend because I'm kind of a hippo evangelist, but whatever the opposite of please go see more hippos is. I just need people to understand that hippos will murder you. Hippos will murder you. Hippos will murder your family. Hippos will then come back and eat your corpse. Like, hippos are wild. They do not swim. They bounce on the bottom of the riverbed faster than your boat.
Yeah, you seen those videos on Twitter where it's just like the
It's just it's just teeth. It's just teeth and anger. They are just teeth and anger. They can't even like they can't sterilize them because they're like their
all right, they're like
their
using for
sexual
birth
organs
control.
move around their body. Like, hippos are wild. Hippos are wild. Like, if if animals were designed by a higher power, somebody was high as hell when they did hippos. Like, they were tripping balls when they made hippos.
I'm trying to remember if I have a favorite hippo fact. I feel like not really. I feel like you covered everything I know about hippos.
Do you know about the hippos um that are in Colombia?
Wait, were those the ones they were like some drug lords hippos?
Yeah, they were, I think, Pablo Escobar's hippos. Like, he
Think
had a menagerie and then they escaped. And now there's just like hippos in Colombia and they can't get rid of them because hippos, like, their hides are so thick that it's really hard to like kill them. And
yeah.
also they breed pretty quickly and they're fast and mean. But also, I believe in like the 1800s, Congress was thinking about bringing hippos to the southern US, which is the basis of a book which I haven't read, but I always thought that was like an amazing like plot bunny. Which is, can you imagine just like you're at Disney World and like a hippo shows up and now your boat's gone?
I feel like Florida has is perilous enough without hippos.
There are the boa constrictors that
Oh my
are going
goodness.
through the Everglades. Florida's great. My mom lives in Florida now, God bless her. She was like, I must end it. I'm tired of being cold. So she moved so she moved to Florida.
I feel like there's bigger things to worry about in Florida than being cold, but I don't know
There
much
is
about the state.
there's a lake nearby, and like I was walking her dog and there's a little sign that was like, beware of alligator, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna walk this dog back home now.
Yeah,
I was like,
no.
I will beware of a taxi, but I'm not gonna beware of an alligator. I refuse. I'm sorry.
I think my favorite thing from that hippo, like we're gonna introduce hippos to the US because we're running low on meat thing, was when they're like, we have to think of how to market it. We need like a snazzy name for it. Lake bacon. That's the term we're gonna use to push this. Lake bacon.
Sometimes you think, well, American politics has gotten stupider, but I like to say that it's always been this stupid, and it's just the way it is. Because lake bacon is wild. Just It's like when they tried to introduce the potato to French peasantry. Have you ever read about this?
I haven't
Like,
heard of it. This is a new one for me.
so this is like pre revolution, and like, like we got this potato from the New World, and like it's really good for you. You can eat it and you can turn it into bread. And the French peasants were like, so we have bread that we like. Let's can we get that? And they were like, no, you don't understand. We're broke. We bought a bunch of palaces, but we got these potatoes. And they tried to like make them into like various like potato dishes, and it failed wildly. The peasantry were like, if you do not bring us bread, we are going to go ape shit. And in fact, they did.
I'm trying,
Potatoes.
I'm trying to think of a single French food that uses. I don't know anything about French food. I was just like potatoes all gratin, but like
Yeah, that's all I can think of is like putting some cheese on it. Like they really didn't like lean into the potato as like a new thing, which is unfortunate because
yeah, potatoes are pretty great, but
potatoes are great. And if you have potato and dairy, you have a nutritionally complete meal. That is all you need to survive is a potato and like a cup of milk.
pretty much. But I guess if they wanted bread, I wouldn't. How are you going to make a potato into bread?
You can make potato bread, but they didn't like it.
Oh, there's actual potatoes in potato bread, like the stuff that you use for hamburgers.
I think like there's actual potatoes in potato bread, unless I have been like laboring under a misapprehension and will Google this immediately after this interview is
I
done.
don't know. I didn't think about it too deeply. I was just like, it's
I think
just a
there's potatoes
name.
in potato bread because you
I
can
mean,
make
French
like
fries aren't French.
French fry. Yeah, well, for a short period of time in certain places, they were freedom fries. Not in New
I don't
York
think I was
City because
alive
that's
for
wild.
that, or it might not have been sentient when that happened. Because I only heard about it after the fact.
I think if you missed it, congratulations. Well done.
Okay. So we're kind of nearing the end of our interview, and I was wondering if there's any upcoming projects that we should keep an eye out for from you.
Yes, actually, I have a few things coming out within publishing is so weird. It's like within the next year or two. Um I have a story in an upcoming anthology called Fit for the Gods. That will be coming out next year, I believe. And there's a lot of really cool authors in there, Zoraida Cordova and Alyssa Cole, and Sarah Gailey. So I hope that the fascination with Greek gods continues because we have more. Also, I have the honor of working co-editing an edition of the name just completely went up. Strange Horizons. We're doing a special edition co-edited with me and Susan Palumbo. It is going to be West Indian, Caribbean science fiction and fantasy. And so probably the beginning of next year, we will be sending out requests for submissions. So if you are a Caribbean writer of science fiction and fantasy, start getting your stories ready because we are really, really excited to shine a light on Caribbean writers and um, kind of like the incredible um, crucible that the Caribbean is for kind of like modernity. And it's going to be a huge project, and I'm really, really excited about it. I'm really excited to be working with Susan, who is just like one of the most amazing people, and also my favorite Trinidadian. So by far. And so it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really excited to have this chance to um, give other Caribbean writers a place to showcase their talent, especially in Strange Horizons, which does so much amazing work with by POC writers across the world, and they should definitely get way more credit than they do.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think we're good for today. So thanks everyone for coming out. Thank you again, Marika, for joining me today.
Thanks for
And
having me.
yeah, of course. And take care, everybody. Bye.